begin now. So I sent an email, and this is what you're going to have as step-by-step instructions that we're going to do right now. And we'll do a 5-minute practice, because this is what everybody's struggling with, is time. So let's see how we can fit in 5 minutes to cover these steps, and how that is good enough. And if you can do 3 5-minute practices when you're in your car waiting for your kid, anything like that is good enough. So what we do, you can even put your watch on timer or your phone on timer for 5 minutes. And so we just basically, the primary entrance to mindfulness presence begins through this living, breathing body. So let's come right to this body, and we can gently close our eyes. And we find our posture. So of course, our support comes from the spine. So a nice straight spine. I like to gently tuck the chin, so the back of the neck. Rest your hands either palms together like this on your lap, or down, palms down on your knees or on your thighs. Let go and relax every single muscle as best you can. And just feel the stillness for 1 moment. Let the mind just settle with the stillness in the body. And bring your attention to the space in your heart. And feel if you're contracting anywhere in the heart space. Without forcing it, just see and invite it to let go. I like to say just the simple word yes in this space. Whatever is here, whatever is going to arise in our practice, may I let it be in this space of stillness with kindness. So let's just contemplate the attitudes of attention that we're developing, so our motivation for our practice. And those attitudes of attention are beginner's mind. So seeing everything just as it is in the present moment with curiosity. Non-striving. So we're not trying to change anything or do anything. Non-judgment. Allowing it to be exactly as it is, but if the mind does judge it, which will happen, we just notice that as judgment. And then we just come back and rest in the stillness in the body and the breath. Acceptance, trust in yourself, patience. Whatever is here, it can be here as long as it is. If it's here every time we sit down to practice, that's okay too. And letting go. So imagine you can feel and sense these gentle qualities in your heart with your eyes closed, like the warmth of the sun shining on you, as if you were bathing in the sun. So trying to sense that warmth inside you. That takes you into your receptive body, into your senses. feeling the warmth and the spaciousness as if the sun was shining in an open, clear blue sky. Imagine the body resting in that space for just a moment as you come to feel your breath. Now take 3 deep, long breaths. Hold it as long as you can and feel any residual tension in the body. Hold your attention on that tension and just release slowly your breath. You can even bring a gentle smile to your corners of your mouth. Just an inner smile, basically saying yes to receive this warmth, rest in it. And one more deep breath. Feeling your whole body now sitting here for a moment in this stillness, in this warmth and spaciousness. And just rest your mind on where you feel the breath most obviously. Let the breath take you into the body as deep as it can go, but without controlling it. You may notice if your mind has wandered, you can just gently come back to sensing where do you feel the breath most. And then rest back into your posture, spine straight. Feel this living, breathing body as a field of sensations and energy. We can gently come back now You can bring your attention to the sounds in the room to come back. And in this open, warm spaciousness, we're going to carry on listening to the slides. And you can continue to have that connection with your breath and listen to the slides at the same time to keep you present. And if the mind wanders, just bring it back, gently but firmly. Okay, so the next 3 weeks, or this is week 6, and then we got week 7 and week 8. So our in-between time, we're focusing on establishing our time schedule for our daily practice, whether it's 5 minutes twice a day, or you can do a 15-minute session once a day. And find what works best for you. Continue to do that. And Make that a formal time that you're going to dedicate and stick to it as much as possible. This is important. So we're starting with 10 minutes minimum, and work your way up as you feel, oh, I'm enjoying this, I'm going to stay a little bit longer. But make that at least, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes and keep my mind from wandering. So why are we doing this daily formal sitting practice? One, we're developing attention and concentration, which is our mindfulness muscle. And we're working on being able to sustain it for longer periods of time. We're doing this formal sitting practice to develop the qualities and attitudes of mindfulness, which is non-judging, non-striving, letting go, patience, trust, acceptance, and beginner's mind. And in order to develop these qualities, we actually need the protective setting of a formal mindfulness practice. Such as mindfulness of breath and the body scan that we have been doing. So these formal meditation practices are like a greenhouse environment that we're creating that nurtures and protects the tender young shoots of the inner heart qualities. So you got to think that these qualities are very, very infantile in their stages. So it's like we're not quite fully giving birth to them yet. So we're nurturing them. We're giving attention to them daily. So we're much able to respond consciously by doing this to any difficult life moments that may arise or any crisis. And, of course, have the habit or the ability to attend to them and remember that what we can do when these things arise. It'll come more and more to our awareness, okay? This is the time to be gentle or kind. So we're just going to talk about the mind very briefly, and this is psychoanalytic theory, Sigmund Freud's theory, that the mind is divided into two parts. So sometimes people divide it into three, so it'll be the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. But we're going to talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind or unconscious. I guess they could be considered the same, the subconscious and the unconscious. So without mindfulness training, we are only conscious of around 10% of the mind's activities. Just 10%. The conscious part are the parts which are held in our awareness, including our willpower, our long-term memory, logical and critical thinking. The unconscious is the part which we are not aware of, which includes our emotions and what's running our thinking and our behaviors. Hidden beliefs are buried beneath that. Habits, the values, our protective reactions, our long-term memories, and imagination and intuition is included in that. So harmful behaviors come from the unconscious mind. Emotions are the driving force behind our many behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Without knowing or training our minds, many of these emotionally driven behaviors are automatic, they're reactive, they're unconscious, and totally out of our control. So, of course, many of these unconscious behaviors are unhelpful in terms of causing harm and suffering to oneself and others. Worry thoughts, for instance, cause us to feel anxious, cause us to feel to secrete stress hormones and cortisol, and that is affecting our health. They say 90% of the driving forces underlying our habits of mind and behaviors are unconscious. So just reflect on that for a moment. 90%. So the unconscious mind and behaviors. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. So to get an idea of the scope of influence our unconscious mind has over our behaviors, we can think about brushing our teeth or driving and how often we perform those other routine tasks without being fully conscious. We can call that running on autopilot. So the same goes with our emotions. Many of our behaviors we wish to change but feel powerless to. For example, when we lash out at someone, or overreact in certain situations and wonder what got into us. And then we add to the emotions already buried after doing something like that with another layer of shame. So we can never actually attend to the core with emotion that's causing our behavior. We just feel guilt, remorse, maybe shame, and then just hopefully forget it and carry on. But it's not actually getting to the bottom of it, and it's judgment. So there's that judgment going on in the background. So this is very important to understand that we have these hidden defense mechanisms and brain structures that cause us to behave in certain ways. And this is based on emotions, basically, that we are not able to cope with. We don't have the capability to be present with. Very unpleasant, very overwhelming feelings. So, I mean, this is part of our survival mechanism as well. So it's not a bad thing, but this is what's going on. So defense mechanisms are habits of behavior we formed to defend ourselves and avoid unpleasant emotions. Some defense mechanisms can help us cope with difficult emotions temporarily and traumatic memories and so forth. So most defense mechanisms, however, just mask unconscious or unwanted feelings, and that contributes to more suffering. And of course, that contributes to what we bury, suppress, and have aversion to feeling. So look at all these types of defense mechanisms that humans have, the ways we avoid unpleasant emotions. So we have very primitive ways, which is we project our emotions onto others, we deny them, disassociation, splitting, mind splitting, idealization, acting out. Then there's the more neurotic, introjection, identification with the feelings, displacement, rationalization, repression, and undoing. And then there's the more mature coping mechanisms, which humor. We can use humor to get away from feelings. Suppression, asceticism, altruism, anticipation, and sublimation. There's so many. So let's talk about where is the emotional part in the brain. You would know this, Irene. It's the limbic system, and primarily the amygdala. So we call that the lizard brain. It's the oldest part of the brain near the stem. So the brain is divided into three major areas. So we have the cortex, which would be up here, the limbic system, and the brain stem. In one part of the limbic region, the amygdala controls many basic functions, including breathing, heart rate, instincts. It's for survival, and also it's for detecting threats and our sense of territory. So it's a very old, primitive part of our brain. It's responsible for processing emotions, especially fear, anger, and sadness. This part of the brain is very old, and the associated neural pathways are why we can easily overreact or lose our control. The amygdala can generate very strong and unpleasant emotions, and at times completely hijack our ability to think and act rationally. Because the way the brain was designed when we needed to survive, the fight, flight, and fear mechanism, or freeze, fight, flight, and freeze, if we sat there and thought for a moment, is this tiger really going to hurt us? We're not really going to survive. So it actually takes that ability of critical thinking away, so it disconnects from those wires, and basically gets all that surge of cortisol and norepinephrine and adrenaline rushing through our body, so we can just react very quickly and respond. So it was useful at one point, but not so useful now, especially when there's stored emotions and memory that are unprocessed. So it's running a lot of our behaviors. Understanding the amygdala and repeated past fear responses from trauma and memory. So in particular, the amygdala mediates the expression of conditioned fear, and the enhancement of emotional memory. So why we can go over things that happened to us in the past over and over and over again. So it can interpret and trigger fear responses and inhibit the ability to remain calm and present, causing many unpleasant emotional and mental states related to past events. Understanding how the amygdala works is key to generating compassion for oneself, first and foremost, and others, and it helps explain why unpleasant emotions are so difficult to regulate. We will talk about trauma and the effects this has on our brain patterns and responses in depth next week. So, we also have threat and reward-based emotions. It's a system, a part of the brain system, threat and reward. So, our brains are wired to help us survive by steering us toward rewards and away from harm through different neural pathways. The feeling part of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages, alerting us of any potential threats or rewards. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain and throughout the body. Different chemical messages are released depending on whether the brain detects something to be a potential threat or a reward. So, the limbic system, the amygdala is considered the reptilian part of the brain, and then the other part of the limbic system, they can say the mammalian or the mammal part of the brain. And we mammals survive because of our brain chemicals steer us toward rewards and away from harm. The brain and how it works with when it detects potential threats. So we talked about our defense mechanisms, the fight or flight or freeze, neurotransmitters. So when the brain detects a potential threat, whether it's real or coming from memory or imagined, it automatically releases the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, throughout the body. This is to prepare us for fight, flight, or freeze, which we talked about. And for a very long time, nature has the brain and wiring to react to danger signals faster than conscious, rational thought. This is how our feelings can be driving and underlying many of our unconscious thought patterns and behaviors. So the brain and how it is wired for potential rewards. So the mammal brain releases a happy chemical when it sees a way to meet its needs. Those happy chemicals are called dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. They call dopamine the reward hormone, oxytocin the love hormone. That's how we bond with our offspring and so forth, and for birth and breastfeeding. And endorphins, the calm hormone, and serotonin, the willpower hormone. So when the brain detects or experiences something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for us, our brain automatically releases endorphins, and these are the reward chemicals that make us feel very pleasant feelings. So this is where our pleasant feelings are coming from, and it reinforces same-like behaviors. So understanding emotions. So our feelings are generated by the emotional part of the brain in response to external or internal stimuli. What we classify as pleasant and unpleasant feelings, those things that we judge, either we're grasping or we have aversion to, now we can understand where they're coming from. So they're triggered by what the brain detects to be either a threat or a reward based stimuli or experience. So for example, threat-based experiences will generate feelings such as fear, anger, disgust, and depression or sadness. Reward-based experiences would generate feelings such as safety, peace, love, and joy. This helps us understand where our desires come from and cause us suffering from either aversion or grasping. This helps us understand where addictions and phobias come from, and this is key to understanding desire and how it plays a role in the different causes of suffering. So, now we're talking about mindfulness and attention training, which we've been doing. And there's so much happening to your brain that you can't see that's under all this. We are activating generally speaking here, we'll get into this more next week when we talk about trauma, but we're also going to talk about what we're activating. What part of the brain is being activated, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is what they call the human brain. So we divided it into the lower amygdala, the reptilian brain, the limbic system, the mammalian brain, and up here is what we call the more evolved brain. Now, we haven't been using that part of the brain. It's just something that's very new. It's a baby part of the brain. But mindfulness attention actually develops the gray matter, and it's responsible for empathy, compassion, the ability to be attentive, critical thinking, all that kind of thing. So that is activated when we're doing simple things like mindfulness of breath for 5 minutes. Those pathways are fired up. So those motions that get trapped in the limbic system and loop around and affect our thinking and the stress loops that we go into, they normally don't, once we go into them, they're very old and habitual, so a lot of them are unconscious and we don't really know they're happening. And we can't really awaken from them. We might have days where we go through feeling very down and sad and not understand what's happening. We may blame it to, blame it on something that's happened, but really something's been triggered and is causing those patterns to be activated in the brain, and they get trapped down there. So when we do mindfulness training, we're actually bringing a more integrated brain. So some people use the hand model. I don't know if you've seen the hand model of the brain. They explain this to kids. So if you put your hand up and you open it, you would say that this is the amygdala, which is the wrist and the brain stem. Here is the limbic system, and here's the prefrontal cortex. When we're attentive and mindful, we have those qualities that we were talking about, acceptance and kindness and those types of things. When something arises, let's just say fear, so it activates the amygdala, we don't have a lot of time usually to keep this connection going, these wires. Usually it goes right into our limbic responses and triggers our behavior and our patterns, and then we lose sometimes and flip our lids, what they call flipping our lids. Literally, we lose connection of that critical thinking, empathy, and all that. And we just go into our patterns and react and blow our lid. So we have to actually bring that back down eventually once the hormones get released and we settle back down and we go, wow, what just happened? So, sorry?
Is that where that
flipping your lid?
Where that saying comes from?
Is it from? So really? This when we're doing the mindfulness awareness, you will notice that you can actually awaken when you feel something, and you can also sometimes be able to, before, let's just say 0 to 10 hits and we blow our lids, we can kind of go, this part of the brain has its own thinking patterns and can assess the situation calmly and reasonably based on the present. Is this an immediate danger, or is this a feeling that's being aroused? Maybe it's memory, maybe it's triggered something, a familiar sensation, so forth, or triggers an emotion that we don't normally accept. That's why we need to accept our emotions. So fear, let's say we have an aversion to fear, which most of us do, anger will come in to try and get away and push it away. And we'll attack what we think is the cause. And we'll attack what we think is the cause. So what happens is, with mindfulness, you have the ability to assess that, because these pathways have been activated when you're doing your meditation. So it can light up and remain mindful and say, wow, I'm really having an experience here, an uncomfortable, unpleasant emotion. Am I in immediate danger? Do I really need to do anything? No. Then I can turn towards that and say, whatever's here right now, go away from the thinking and drop into the sensation and allow it. Say, can I be kind and allow this feeling to be here right now? Put your hand on your heart. That will settle down the nervous system and send that message to the nervous system, we're okay. So what you're doing is you're creating a new neural pattern. And the more you do that over and over, just gently respond with those qualities. You don't have to do anything. It's non-striving. It's just saying, yes, you can be here. This is what's here in the moment. Allow it. Come to your breath if you need to soften with your breath and breathe with the sensation if you have time to sit with it. Open and relax the muscles in the body. And so that more we do that, the more we're going to be able to awaken to do that when we're not in danger. Because we do need to respond to danger, but most of the time we're not at threat. So mindfulness and attention training has measurable physical effects on the structure of the brain. Most noticeably, growth in the gray matter of the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain. Critical, let's just say rational critical thinking part of the brain, and reduction in the size of the amygdala, so the fight, flight, freeze part of the brain. Summary of benefits is there's quite a bit here. Increase in learning when we're doing our mindfulness practice. Increases our learning ability, our memory, our perspective taking. Increases focus on wider agenda, the ability to let go of judgments, rigidity of thinking, focusing on personal agenda. It helps with building relationships, so awareness of the social dynamic, positive emotions, generating more positive emotions that reinforce positive behavior. So when you start getting those calm feelings in your meditation, you're actually reinforcing the behavior to actually practice. That's why in the beginning we have to be diligent to be more disciplined to do our practice, because we don't have those qualities developed yet. So we have to say, well, I'm sitting here to actually nurture those tender shoots of, acceptance, non-striving, and the inner heart qualities. But once we start to feel them and sense them and get back into that awareness of them, because they're getting bigger and bigger and they're growing, then it's actually going to change the mind and motivate our behavior to do it more regularly. So it increases positive emotions, psychological functioning, helps with self-regulation, and your empathy levels. We can forgive much easier because we see how hard it is to deal with our own patterns and neurosis and stuff like that. And forgiveness is really a blessing. Not many of us can do it. It's not an easy process, but mindfulness can get you there. Resilience gives us resilience for handling difficult emotions, positive outlook in life, lowers blood pressure and chances of getting depression. Increases with lateral thinking, problem solving, creates more ideas and ways to approach problems, flexibility of thinking, so we don't get locked in our belief systems and so forth, which can cause us a lot of conflict in relationships. Awareness of thinking process used observation and working memory. So that's just a whole heap of stuff. So we are talking about mindfulness of emotion. So this is what we're going to start to include in our practice. Now we're gradually working our way to include emotions. But first, we need to understand our emotional world, like we talked about. In order to practice mindfulness, we need to know, train, and free the mind. We need to understand that that's what we're doing. We need to know our mind-wandering patterns, but also the emotions and what's happening deep below the surface of the mind. When we let go of the mind wandering and bring ourselves back to sensing the breath, then we can slowly start to include the sensations of emotions. We're not used to doing this, so we don't force ourselves. We always come back to the breath, let the breath in its natural rhythm soften and guide us to open up to feeling the sensations. If we get overwhelmed, then we come back to the breath. So it's a gradual expansion into now mindfulness of emotions. So how do we know, train, and free the mind of the emotions? Normally, we can only perceive our emotions at the very surface level. So we're seeing the automatic judgments, the habitual reactive patterns, and they happen without our knowing. These patterns are based on many drivers that we talked about, buried deep and not in our regular conscious awareness. Knowing and understanding the many unconscious factors and influences that generate different emotional states is vital to being able to train and free the mind in our practice. Oprah Winfrey says, turn your wounds into wisdom. Aristotle, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And I'm going to add to that and say, knowing our suffering. I think that's where wisdom comes and compassion comes from. It's getting intimate with our own suffering, and then it expands to others. So our emotions that cause suffering and primarily the aversion, the self-aversion we have towards them, or the patterns of aversion. So negative emotions such as anxiety and depression can weaken our immune system. And just because, there's a little clip here, just because I can't explain the feelings causing my anxiety doesn't make them less valid. So we don't stop at just saying anxiety. That's really not going to get penetrate further into seeing what's below and what's at the core of the emotion, what's inside of it, what's its true nature. Our habit is to basically assign a label to it. So we're dropping all labels. An emotion is a feeling. We're feeling it. We discuss the threat and reward system and defense mechanisms that happen automatically. The defense mechanisms are designed to actually reject emotions and bury them from our awareness so we don't have to feel them. But this is not what we necessarily want to do anymore. So this is why we suffer from feelings and the causes and conditions for depression and anxiety. It's easy to see how we lose control, and we've covered all this, and suffer from the unpleasant emotional states. I just really want to emphasize that we have very little control of this. So this helps to generate compassion and kindness towards ourselves. And remember, patience. These patterns are hardwired. They take a while to change. I was listening to, I read an article, and the Dalai Lama talked about and shared with people that he didn't really take serious trying to change his attitudes till I think around age 16, which is very young, but I mean, the monk life is different. And he said, I don't know how old he is now, I think he's 80-something. So how many years later he says that it's still not satisfactory. So if someone like that, who practices the way he does, still has attitudes and even discrimination and biases and things along that line that he's wishing to still work on, then that really allows us to have patience. It's easy to see how we lose control. Okay, so for this reason, we can contemplate the sincere need to practice mindfulness of emotions and to develop kindness and patience towards them. We will never understand them or see clearly into what they really are beyond our judgments if we don't accept them. Mindfulness of emotions, going below the surface. Anger, for example, and what we see at the surface is just a tiny part. So this is the tip of the iceberg. We're looking at anger here at the top. When we look at anger and observe it without judgment, we can find there are other emotions under the surface. As we feel the sensation of anger and we grow more tolerant to it, because it's a very difficult one, it's heat and it's fire and all that, to sit with it, we're just going to have to slowly touch it with our breath, come back, take refuge in our breath and body. So, but when we start penetrating and it starts to change its sensations and move, and it will, because it's a part of our impermanent nature. There's causes and conditions there. So as the causes and conditions change, by holding it with kindness, you may penetrate and find sadness there. So we hold sadness in our practice. And sadness may lead us to find that there's fear or panic or shame at the bottom and root of all of that before we actually get to its true nature. So imagine these emotions of having layers of conditioning on them. So that would be our memories, our associations, our thoughts about them, our judgments about what an emotion is good and what isn't, and I can't handle this and all those things. Once we really actually can just feel it as it is, and it moves beyond and into these layers, it comes back to its true nature. It's free from conditioning eventually. That's how we're freeing it. So, it really is just a manifestation of some need for love and kindness. That's what anger, we can say, generally is. So actually, anger, if analyzed, is a great teacher for the most important need to acknowledge suffering. As Buddha taught in the Four Noble Truths, and our deepest need and desire to be free from suffering. This can lead us to generate compassion, and compassion is the great protector and true refuge from all emotional and mental afflictions. Anger, acknowledged, can transform and develop the petals of our heart and awaken our true nature. It can lead us back to the essence of love at its core. So, summary or purpose of mindfulness of emotions. So this is how emotions contribute to suffering. We learned about that, and how the causes, or alternatively, how through our mindfulness practices they can actually lead us to develop the qualities such as patience and kindness for healing and transformation, and eventually self-realization of our true nature. So we're slowly getting to the end here, but some practice tips for when we're doing mindfulness of emotions to keep in mind. When an unpleasant feeling arises, we can acknowledge its presence. So that's avoiding aversion. That first acknowledgement can cut that pattern right away of going into our aversive patterns. Relax back. Like you would in your meditation, you're getting used to what non-striving is and being receptive. So when we feel a feeling, relax back. Say yes, I love the hand thing, or allow. Putting your hand here is actually activating a whole bunch of things in the nervous system. It's sending a message to the nervous system to relax and open heart. And then just give it space as best you can to be as it is and as it's presenting itself. And use your breath to breathe with it. Experience the sensation of the emotion fully. But again, like I said, we're moving towards experiencing these feelings. We may only get pieces of them from session to session. And that's important, that we know our capacity of where we're getting stressed. And that's when we're going to be activating the stress pathway. So when we start to feel stress and it gets too much, then just go back to our base foundation, the body and the breath. So if you want to, as your practice expands into feeling the sensation of the body, focus on where you feel it in the body. Is it a pressure in the heart? Is it a tightness in the stomach? Feel all the different sensations of what it feels like. And then where you feel it in the body, try to relax in and around that sensation with those qualities that we talked about. Practice applying warmth and spaciousness. And when I feel emotions, I don't necessarily have to think of those words, non-judging, non-striving. Once I've kind of studied all those, I assign them to what we're doing in our practice is to represent that feeling of a warm sun shining on our face. That's those qualities. and the spaciousness of a bright, open, boundless blue sky. And so I would imagine that activates that for me, those qualities, and then feeling that sensation with that. Another key thing is we're learning to drop identification or labels or stories about emotions. I feel and this happened to me, because that's grasping, and that's causing to keep that trapped emotion. We're actually feeding it to remain in its state, so it can't change, it can't transform. So drop normal personal identifications of mine and just experience it with a beginner's mind. What did I put here? Senseless thoughts repeated endlessly surrounding the self. Okay. So that's just something to reflect on. So for example, if there's no urgency, then just see it as a welcomed visitor. Everything is assumed to be welcomed. So assume it is an old rejected part of yourself or feeling, and now it's ready to be absorbed back into the heart space. As your heart's opening, it's sensing and saying, "Oh, I'm coming over here." So just imagine that you've already put the welcome mat out and it's just coming. You're prepared for it. You're open for anything. Imagine it to be a wound, so you can have that generation of compassion. This is suffering. This is a wound. This really hurts. Let me be kind to this. Practice to radically accept the emotion as much as you can and as long as it presents itself, as many times, over and over. Try to be aware, because this happens very frequently, and we're not necessarily aware of it. But try to be aware if you're practicing in order to get rid of something. Well, if I do this, then I'll never have to feel this fear again. You'll never transform anything if that's playing in the background. So it can play in the background, but it's the awareness of it that doesn't allow it to have power. So a lot of times we don't recognize that our motivation, it's changing day to day depending on how we're feeling. So the motivation to develop these qualities should always be in the forefront. Well, this is an object that I can use to apply those qualities. Notice any hidden expectations or desire to get rid of it. So train to notice judgments, stories, memories, and bring the mind back to breathing and just allowing sensations as long as you set to practice mindfulness. So that's it. Okay, so that was a lot of talk. So for homework, we're just going to continue our daily meditation practice. Continuing to establish it. Continuing to develop those qualities, and hopefully we get those warm sensations and feelings, which is going to reinforce our practice and make it more easier. Continue to investigate what time works for you. 30 minutes a day would be, what we're striving for, but we're starting with 10 minutes. You can break that up into 2 sessions, 3 5-minute sessions. I recommend in the beginning to do small, short sessions, as many as you can do. So 3 would be really ideal, but if you only do 2 5-minute sessions, that's really good too. And then just record your obstacles that prevent you from practicing that are arising, so you can keep noticing. Those are things that are part of the mind's activities that you can just train to let go of and still sit down and be diligent and do your 5 minutes or whatever it is. And record any benefits that you notice that help motivate you to practice. So we've got 10 minutes left of our hour. We can do another ending practice, but I'll just give us a break if you want to get a drink or go to the washroom for a moment.
I'm okay.
You okay?
Yep.
Just have a drink.
How are you feeling, Heather?
Hmm?
How are you feeling?
Good.
Starting to feel heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still good though.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think in the next 3 weeks I'm going to be walking like a waddle. So. Okay, so the email that I sent included the step-by-step breakdown of our daily formal practice, but the first one we did in the beginning today was the short practice. This is an extension which we could carry to move beyond what we did. So the longer practice. And so we were just doing mindfulness of breath and contemplating the qualities as our short practice, 5-10 minutes. And then this is something that we could do for an additional 10 minutes, making it a 20-minute practice of the body scan. So we're including the body scan, but we're also going to do the body scan a little quicker because we're more used to it now. And we're just going to open, and this will be our opening just to see if there's any emotions there. And if there is, apply the principles. So you can lie down or you can sit for this body scan part. And we're just coming back to our posture. The first and foremost thing is the body. Feeling the stillness and the presence immediately in the body. So again, we left off with the body, feeling it as a living, breathing field of energy and sensations. Our spine is nice and straight. Chin slightly tucked if we'd like. We place our hands on our lap, palms up together or separately, palms down. Resting the arms at our side if you're lying down with the palms up. And if you're lying down, feet can be slightly apart and drop to the side. So just to bring to mind our motivation, we can use the image of sunbathing in a warm sun. This warm sun. This feeling our heart space. If there's any tightness or if we're not feeling very relaxed in the heart space, we can invite to soften here, saying yes, and immediately sensing that sun and that warmth of that sun, touching the heart space, coming from the heart space, and an open, vast, boundless, clear blue sky. So that quality of spaciousness to allow everything that may arise or what is here right now already. So that includes the tightness in the body. So we're going to bring that warm sun. You can imagine it as a sphere of pure white light, about smaller than the size of our head. Slightly smaller than the size of the head. And we're going to bring that down to touch the crown or the top of the head. And just relax and feel the top of your head and the sensations on the top of your head for a moment. Feel the eyes. Feel that warmth and spaciousness in the eyes. Relax. The corners of the eyes can gently lift to feel that inner smile. Feel the whole face, as if we can feel the sun rays on our whole face. And the whole back of the head. And as if that light comes down inside, and you can feel it in the middle of the eyes or between the right and left brain. So relaxing the right side of the head, the left side of the head. Relaxing cheeks, jaw, tongue, resting your tongue. Resting the back of the throat, and imagine that light coming down and feeling that warmth and spaciousness as we're allowing our breath naturally to come in and out. Feeling that warmth in the throat. Feel the right side of the throat, the thyroid, the left side of the throat. And feeling the tightness that we normally hold here in the shoulders and the space between the neck and the shoulders, the muscles. Imagine that warmth and that spaciousness dissolving any tension here. Feel that move down both arms, upper arms. Feel letting go of your elbows, your lower arms, and the sensations in your hands. If you're grasping your hands, soften your hands a little more and let them open. Feel the fingers, the thumbs, the second, third, fourth, and the pinkies. And bring your awareness now as if that light comes down from the throat and into the chest, touching the area of the heart, the lungs, right side, left side of the lung. Feeling your upper back and that warmth. Sliding the shoulders down the back further. The spine is nice and straight, but the muscles melting down the back. Stillness still there, strong as the body sitting here. The breath naturally moving in and out. We can feel where the breath is. Feeling that warmth of the light and spaciousness move down to the upper stomach. Feel if you have any tightness and invite that to soften. Let your breath naturally or gently, if you can sense your breath this low at this point, let it touch with tenderness this area of the body, the upper stomach, the liver on the right side of the upper stomach, on the left side, the pancreas, the spleen, and feeling into the middle of the stomach, imagining the whole intestinal tract and that warmth and spaciousness coming here, softening into the middle of the stomach. And then coming right into the lower belly, below the belly button, softening here. Right down the middle, imagining on the right side, in the right area of the reproductive area, uterus, ovary, fallopian tube. And then on the left side, just letting go if there's any tightness there. Left side, uterus, ovary, fallopian tube. Lower back, letting the breath, if it can come down here or if it is down there, touch with tenderness that area. And then softening into the hips. So feeling the right hip, and on the left side, the left hip, the thighs, the knees. Just letting go if you feel any tightness. Bring your awareness there for a moment. Gently inviting to soften at the lower legs. And then just feel all the sensations in the feet. Feel the toes, base of the feet, top of the feet. And then just come to your breath, wherever you feel it most, in this open, warm spaciousness. If your attention wanders, just bring it back. For 1 minute here, we're just going to sense if there's any feelings that we may be pushing away, that may just be here, the surface of our awareness. If your mind wanders, you can come back and see if there's where your breath is and if there's a feeling there again. And maybe if you can allow that feeling by saying yes and thinking of that, of the qualities of that warmth and spaciousness at the same time. Thinking of that analogy of the tender shoots, the baby lotus, and the greenhouse environment that we've created right now in this space, nurturing the inner heart, compassion, love. You can imagine the tenderness, feel and sense the tenderness. These qualities may be ever so faint, but when we really become soft and open, we can sense them. And sense those qualities. And with that acceptance and openness, we can come back into our bodies, back into our breath. Gently open our eyes and we can come into the room and we can start with feeling the sounds in the room, adjusting to the light in the room. Still having that awareness of the breath breathing on its own rhythm, the nice soothing, calm feeling that we have that of the nervous system, and we can close our practice here and carry on.
Great, Heather. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm just going to stop the recording now and then